Hello class, today we're going to be discussing section 3-4 in your algebra book, and the title is going to be Finding the Slope. Alright, and this is going to be the slope of a line. And when I'm talking about the word slope, I mean how steep is that line? And that's why I have a picture of a mountain here. Whenever I think of the slope, I think of climbing up a mountain and how steep is it going up. And when you're walking up a mountain, it's going to be a positive slope. When you're walking down the mountain, it's going to be a negative slope. It's a lot easier to go down, and that's going to be a negative number. So the same thing you can do when you have a line, you can find the value of the incline of that line. And a lot of times when we're talking about slope, sometimes we call it the variable m, which means we're just going to get a number. And what we're doing is we're comparing two different things on that line. We're comparing the change in the y values compared to the change in the x values. And many times we're going to call this the rise compared to the run. And this is very simple to do, to calculate this slope, this value. And so we're going to begin with this first example. I already have a line on here, and all that we have to do, it's really easy. We're just going to pick any 2 points on the line. So I'm going to pick this point right here, and I like to pick ones that meet perfectly at two different lines. So here I'm going to call this one, let's see, this is 3, 4, so I'm going to label it. And I'm also going to pick maybe one way down here. I'm going to label this one as well. This is -2, -1. And so when I am finding the slope, again, I'm trying to find the change in the y values compared to the change in the x value. So I'm going to start down here at the bottom where I have my big dot, and I'm going to go up. I'm going to rise until I get to the same level of the second dot, and I'm going to count how many spaces. So this time I'm just counting. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So as you can see, I'm going up 5 spaces. That's my rise. Okay, so over here when I'm finding my slope, okay, and I'm looking for the change in y, at first that's going up 5. That's my change in y. And then from the same point, I need to try to find how many spaces it's going to take to get to the dot going sideways. Okay, this is my run. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So my run, in this case, it's actually also the same number 5. So again, I'm looking at this. It's going to be the change in y compared to the change in x. And I'm going to divide those values. And I said that that was 5. So I'm going to divide it by 5. And I know that 5 divided by 5 is the number 1. So this should be pretty straightforward for us to do. And I'm sorry you can't see that. Let me move it over just a little bit. So that's going to be the number 1, which means the incline of this line is the value 1. And I'm going to look at the same line again, but this time I'm going to show you that you can choose any 2 points that you want. So this time I'm going to choose this point right here. This is at 1, 2, and I'm going to choose maybe this one down below. This is at -3, -2. And again, I can do the same thing, but how about I start at this top point this time? And again, I'm going to count my spaces. So first I'm going to do how far it's rising, going up and down. But as you can see, to get from this point down here, I need to go down. So let's count our spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces going down. And that's actually negative. Do you see that? If I were going up, it would be positive. Going down is negative. And then from this point, I'm still going to travel sideways. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, but this is in the negative direction. If I went to the right, I'd be moving in the positive direction. Here I'm going to the negative direction. So again, if I'm going to figure out my slope, I'm going to compare the change in y to the change in x. and I determined that the change in y was -4. The change in x was -4 as well. -4 divided by -4 is the value 1. So as you can see, I chose two different points, I went two different ways, and I still got the same slope for this line. Now as you can tell that this is a positive slope, it's going up just like the mountain, so I got a positive number for my slope. In this next example, you're going to see that the incline is going a different direction. It's higher on the left and lower on the right. So it looks like I'm climbing down the mountain, so let's see if I also will get a negative slope. So just like before, I'm going to choose two values that are on this line. So let's see, how about this one right here? That looks like it's right where it's being meeting at the crossroads. So that is 2, 1, and this one way up here is also right there. So I'm going to do, this is -2, 3. Okay, and if you want to do the same way, you can, where you can count how many spaces you're moving either up or down and left or right. But I'm going to show you another way. The slope, which we know is m now, is the change in y divided by the change in x. Which means, what is the change of the two y values? And what is the change of the two x values? So if I'm going to pick one of my points, it doesn't matter which one, I just need to be consistent. So how about I label this one as my x1 and my x2, or my y1, I'm so sorry. And then this one is my x2 and my y2. All right. My y2, as you can see, is 1. And I'm going to subtract my y1, which is 3. 1 minus 3. On the bottom, I'm going to go back again. My x2 is the number 2. And I'm going to subtract my x1 value, which is -2. All right? I know from all my lessons of adding and subtracting negative numbers, 1 minus 3 is -2. 2 minus -2 is +4, and -2 divided by +4 is -1/2. Did I get a negative slope? Yes, I did. I got -1/2 because, as I can see from my line, it is going down the mountain, which is going to be a negative slope. So now you found two different ways to calculate the slope. The first one was what we did when we just counted how many spaces we went. But the second time we actually used the formula, we labeled on one of our points x1 and y1, and the second point x2 and y2, and we filled them into our formula and we got our slope that way. So let's do another one, because we know not all lines are going diagonally. Sometimes you might have a line that is a horizontal line. Can you still find the slope of this line? Yes, you can. Again, pick any 2 points. So how about we pick this one right here? This is at 3, -2. And I can pick this one right here. This is at -1, -2. And using my formula, I can figure out what the slope is. So I'm going to label these. This is going to be my x1 and my y1. This is going to be my x2 and my y2. And the top is always the change in y. The bottom is always the change in x. And I'm going to plug those in. My y2 is -2. And I'm going to subtract my y1, which is -2 again. My x values, my second one is 3. And I'm going to subtract -1. And what do you notice happens at the top? This turns into -2 plus +2 divided by 3 plus 1. And I get 0 over 4. And in the end, that is 0. And this should make sense. What is the incline of a flat line? It's not changing at all. You're just walking flat. There's no more mountain. So the slope should be 0 as you move along that line. So remember that. A horizontal line, you're going to get the slope for the value of 0. But we also can find where we have a vertical line. Again, let's do the same method. Let's pick any 2 points. Let's label this one 3, 4, and let's label this one 3, -3. Again, let's find our slope. I'm going to label my points. This is going to be my x1 and my y1. This is going to be my x2, my y2. I'm going to use the same formula, y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. I'm going to plug them in. My y2 is -3, and I'm going to subtract 4. My x2 is +3, and my x1 is also 3. On the top, I'm going to get -7, but the bottom, I'm going to get 0. What do we know from all that we've learned? Can you divide any number by 0? No, you can't. So that means that this is going to be undefined, which means I have no way of figuring out what this slope is. It's a vertical line. So is there any change in the slope of a vertical line? No. All right? It is already straight up and down from one point to another. So I can't even figure out what this slope is. So if this happens to you, this is going to be undefined. At the end, you might have just 2 points that you're given. Maybe you're going to be given the coordinate 5, 2, and maybe a second one, 4, -1. Even without a graph, you can still find the slope of this line if these are 2 points on the same line. So again, let's use our formula. M equals y2 divided by y1, or subtract y1, I'm sorry, divided by x2 minus x1. Let's label these. And you can choose whichever point you want to be your first point and your second point. I'm just going to label them in the order that they came. So x1 and y1, x2 and y2, and I'm going to plug them in. -1 minus 2 divided by 4 minus 5. I'm going to get -3 on the top. I'm going to get -1 on the bottom. -3 divided by -1 is +3. So just by having 2 points, I can use my slope formula to find out what the slope is. So to review, I have 4 graphs here. If you have a line that looks like this, that's going higher from left to right, this is going to be a positive slope. Just by looking at it, you already know your answer should be positive. If you have one that's going the opposite direction, it's higher on the left, lower on the right, this is going to give you a negative slope. If you have any horizontal line, there's no change in the incline. As you go along the road, it is still flat, so the slope here will always be 0. But again, if you have a vertical line, I cannot figure out the value of that slope, so we will always call that undefined. I hope that this has helped you, and I will answer any questions when you come back to class. Take care.